Get underway on time. We're just a couple of minutes over, but people coming in, take your seats. The rest who have a place at the, well, it's called a round table, but it's really a rectangular table. But if you could take your seats fairly urgently so we can crack on. Thank you very much. So I'm going to be in your hands pretty much.
You're just following the countries that I tell you?
Yes. I'm just doing as I'm told this time. Say when you want to start. I think we might as well. Yes, I think we might as well. 1, 2, 3, 4. Cut. So can everybody hear me? Sound okay at the back? Can you hear me at the back of the room? Great. Okay. Well, thank you, first of all, for that wonderful tea ceremony, which made me want to have a cup of green tea myself. And I am, in fact, a lover of green tea, and I drink nothing else, strangely enough. Just a little explanation. The way of tea, as it's called, basically surrounds activities that are part of everyday life. So this is what it's all about, really, today. So the way of tea is the art of living. The principles behind the art of living are harmony, respect, purity, and tranquility, which are our guiding principles, really, aren't they? In a world filled with friction. So those kind of qualities can guide us towards, hopefully, a bit more of a smoother, genuine peace. That's Sado, the Japanese way of tea. But now we move on to this high-level round table, which we've titled How to Enhance Policy Support for Education for Sustainable Development. Alongside me, you will recognize Irina Bokova, DG of UNESCO, and Mr. Hakubom Shinomura, Minister and Co-Chair of this round table. Time is of the essence, and I'll explain why after Madame Bokova opens this round table and explains a little more about how we're going to enhance policy support. So I hand it over to you, Madam.
Thank you very much, Stephen, and thank you for opening it with the reminding us the beautiful ceremony, tea ceremony, because I believe this is the other also beautiful side of UNESCO, respecting cultures, and which is so much in need nowadays, mutual respect, mutual understanding, tolerance. And I believe this is also part of the agenda of sustainable development education. So, Minister Shimomura, thank you very much, and all the other ministers for coming for this high-level event, roundtable on education for sustainable development. And we have been speaking this morning that this conference is meant to take stock of the whole decade of education for sustainable development, and also to endorse the global plan of action that was adopted, approved by the General Conference just recently. And allow me once again to thank Japan and also Minister Shimomura for the initiative of establishing a UNESCO Japan Prize on Education for Sustainable Development, which I think will encourage a lot more projects, a lot more of initiatives and concrete ideas. I think we have wonderful examples of practical implementation of the concept of education for sustainable development in many countries, and I encourage you to share your experience, to share your views, so that we can look at best practices and we can look at what works. At the same time, of course, we have challenges, and I equally encourage you to share your experiences in overcoming these challenges, of setting, I would say, the right targets, the right objectives, the right goals, looking at the difficulties and to see how we can elaborate some of the common paths of overcoming these challenges. Because I do believe that the time for education for sustainable development has come. It is a critical conference. I think the conference already is a big success. Listening this morning to the very inspiring introduction by His Imperial Highness, the Crown Prince, by Her Royal Highness, Princess Lala Hasna, by the Minister and so many others, ministers among you. I think we know what we're talking about. I think we are very mobilized. We are very conscious about the imperative, I would say, now when we are 1 year before the adoption of the post-2015 Global Sustainable Agenda, which should be universal, which should be human-centered, and also which should be very much taking care of the sustainability in all the different aspects. And I think we know what the content and what the objective of education for sustainable development is. So we have, I would say, a critical year ahead of us. We have to continue the momentum. We have to keep what we have achieved already, to have within the global sustainable education goal that is emerging after the Muscat Agreement, after all the long, I would say, consultation process and work at different levels, at the political level, at the expert level, within our partners from the civil society. We have a target of education for sustainable development within this goal. We have to keep it, we have to fill it with content, and then we have to set, I would say, the right way of monitoring, evaluating, and assessing the results. This is also part of the debate about the post-2015 agenda. So I'm very much looking forward to listening to your debates, and I'm very privileged and very honored to have as a co-chair Minister Shimomura with me. Thank you very much, Mr. Minister.
And thank you, DG. So let's hear from Mr. Shimomura.
Thank you, Madam Bokova. I am Hakubun Shimomura, Minister of Education, Culture, Sports, Science and Technology of Japan. I will be serving as a co-chair along with Madam Director General Bokova. How was the Japanese tea ceremony presented by UNESCO Goodwill Ambassador and the 15th generation Grand Tea Master Sen Gens? I hope you enjoy it. Let me express again my thanks and welcome to the Education and Environment Ministers and others from many countries and regions who came to Japan to discuss ESD. The people gathered here today have been playing key roles for promoting ESD around the world. I urge you to use these high-level round-table talks to arrive at ideas on how to promote ESD further around the world, based on the experiences of each country. And I agree each country to share its determination to take specific action to promote ESD. Although we have only 2 hours, the discussion here will be very important in that it would formulate global momentum for education. I hope that we will be able to discuss from a broad perspective the kind of role that ESD will play for this. I would now like to hand the mic over to moderator Mr. Stefan Krug.
Thank you very much indeed. Just before we begin the statements, let me remind you of the objectives, because we're trying to provide guidance on the drivers and the barriers to an enhanced policy, therefore, a policy response leading to the necessary actions, and a reminder that a summary of the discussion will be prepared and presented during the closing plenary. I can also tell you those taking part can follow the roundtable here in this room as space permits, and there will also be a live broadcast in the Century Hall. We're looking at the challenges to come for the Global Action Plan, the key drivers and the challenges. That word challenges keeps reappearing, doesn't it? Looking really and finding out from you what works. There will, of course, be simultaneous interpretation in English, Spanish, Chinese, French, Japanese, Arabic. can I make a plea for everyone to put their mobile phones off or on vibration mode? Let's start the introductory statements with Mr. Yassin, who is Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Education from Malaysia.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Honorable Co-Chairs, Excellency Rina Bokova, Director General of UNESCO, Excellency Minister Hakabun Shimomura, Honorable Ministers, ladies and gentlemen. The decade of education for sustainable development is coming to a close. Like many conclusions, we need to take a step back and take stock of what we have achieved and what needs to be done further. The unsustainable patterns of life today has seriously impacted the lives of the people globally, and today's world continues to face various critical challenges such as human-induced climate change, the spread of infectious diseases, the frequency of national disasters, the loss of biodiversity, and the rapid depletion of natural resources. Now, if these challenges are not addressed collectively, the very basis of sustainable development that meets the needs of the present world without compromising the ability of future generations to meet the needs as reiterated in the Brundtland Report will render meaningless. Such a concept is indigenous in many societies as a matter of practice, but have in recent decades overtaken by a modern but unsustainable lifestyle. The concept of sejahtera, like that of the Sejahtera Center of Tongyong in South Korea, take roots in the Malay culture to promote a balanced way of life. Now, striking a balance between the needs of the people and the conservation of the planet in the pursuit of peace and prosperity is pertinent to enhance the quality of life for today and, of course, the future generation. Equally pertinent today, in the context of the private sector and the government, will be the profit and political dimensions of the 4 Ps. And such education for sustainable development, or ESD, forms a fundamental pillar in nurturing human capital with qualities for the 21st century. And Malaysia has always been committed to education for sustainable development. The Malaysian National School curriculum from preschool to secondary schools has incorporated the element of ESD across all subjects. As a unique country with diverse cultures and traditions, the curriculum also focuses on peace, social cohesion, cultural diversity, democracy, and justice, among others, to foster inter-ethnic understanding. And Malaysia, like many countries gathered here today, has made progress and has taken up various initiatives to promote ESD, yet I believe more needs to be done. At the higher education institutions, various universities have moved downwards in the education chain to collaboratively build capacity among school teachers and empowering students to learn SD by doing with the aid of the community. And for example, the University Science Malaysia's Regional Center of Expertise on ESD joint community projects co-create local solutions, while the University Community Transformation Center plays similar roles in poverty alleviation through diversification of income-generating activities, improving safety and security, and of course, promoting sustainable livelihood. Success stories of the Quadruple Helix Knowledge Transfer Program involving the academia, industry, government, civil society include seaweed cultivation management in Semprona, Sabah of East Malaysia, vermicomposting for municipal solid waste, recycling to promote environmental friendly processes, converting organic waste using special worms, and green building technology on using light to decompose toxic pollution. As ESD forms an overarching goal of post-2015 developmental agenda, it is imperative that it adopts cross-cutting or multidisciplinary approaches. Higher education institutions need to be empowered as the main actor in mainstreaming ESD, not only horizontally between HEIs, but also vertically to support schools and non-HEI by cascading implementation and advocacy, and higher institutions need to play a central role to develop relevant teaching materials and resources on ESD that seeks to do more and better with less. In addition, collaborations can be fostered diagonally, involving community-based knowledge, entities like zoos, recreational parks, and of course, cultural centers. Religious and faith-based approaches toward ESD is also recognized. For example, Islam's concept of maqasid ash-sharia as a way of life in preserving and protecting life, intellect, posterity, and prosperity assimilate well to the 4 Ps of ESD. Pivotal in all this is a consistent, transformative, or turn-around leadership with emphasis on financial prudence in steering institutions. And moving forward, as proposed in the Royal Keynote Address at the Malaysia's 2014 Khazanah, the Malaysia Sovereign Wealth Fund Mega Trends Forum, 3 paradigm shifts are put forth. Shift 1, from production to preservation to minimize wastages and overproduction. Shift 2, from maximization to optimization, striking and making decisions that the optimized point beyond which would be counterproductive and excessive risky. And shift 3, from resource ownership to stewardship, the notion that humans do not own resources but are merely trustees to ensure resources remain undiminished for the future generations. And perhaps I can add another pertinent shift. It is shift 4, from a siloed, led, or exclusively government or private sector to collective-led partnership of the quadruple helix model. And this can be even at the level of transcending national boundaries, like ASEAN, for example. And with the emergence of an ASEAN community by the end of 2015, Malaysia's role as chairman of ASEAN could be instrumental in putting the shift into reality. In other words, post-2014 chairman, ESD has an even broader sense to operate from, which augurs well for co-creating a sustainable future. Commitment to change is required from all levels of the community, from grassroots activists to educators and, of course, policymakers. And only by working together at all levels can we ensure that ESD moves beyond the realm of pilot projects and individual case studies to a more system-wide catalyst for change. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And thank you, Deputy Prime Minister. Let's go straight to Ms. Aida Hadziliac, Minister for Upper Secondary School and Adult Education and Training in Sweden. The floor is yours for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Madam Director General, Your Excellencies, distinguished ministers, and ladies and gentlemen. I would first like to thank the host, Japan, for giving us such a successful conference hitherto. It's an honor to be given this opportunity to introduce and share some thoughts on what actions are required to enhance the policy response to education for sustainable development. As we all know, knowledge is the key in a society where development satisfies our present needs without comprising future generations. Moving towards sustainable development cannot be achieved by political agreements, financial incentives, or technological solutions alone. To safeguard the natural environment and promote greater global equity, we need a fundamental change in the ways we think and act. And this can only be achieved if all individuals in all societies are equipped and empowered by knowledge, skills, and values, as well as heightened awareness to drive such change. I would like to highlight some of the experience we have gained in Sweden during the last decade on education for sustainable development. Experiences that we think have a universal relevance when speaking about what actions are needed at national and international levels in order to enhance the policy response to ESD. It is often stated that many actors have a responsibility regarding education for sustainable development. Business, NGOs, academia, etc. But nevertheless, I'd like to emphasize the importance of governments to take their responsibility using all available means and tools. The political engagement is vital in moving forwards in the implementation of ESD. A national action plan for ESD with reference to the Global Action Program based on research and proven experiences containing clear targets and means for monitoring is an essential tool in this respect. Another perspective in bridging education, innovation, green technology, and entrepreneurship is about providing work opportunities and solutions for the future in one combination. During the decade, Sweden has included sustainability in formal, institutional, and curriculum guidelines for preschool, as well as primary, secondary education. We also made an amendment to the Higher Education Act stating that all universities have to promote sustainable development. Knowledge in sustainable development is one of the objectives that students in teacher training education and engineering education should have reached by the end of their education. At the same time, we have limited information on what is actually occurring in the schools and universities regarding the implementation of ESD. To move ahead in the right direction, you have to know where you have been. So monitoring and evaluation are crucial components to strengthen the policy response to ESD. Observing the achievements and results of previous decisions enables politicians and policymakers to draw conclusions in order to take further steps in the implementation of ESD at a full scale. And we should remember that only a well-informed and educated public opinion can create the necessary demand for sustainable development and elect political leaders who are willing to take responsibility and long-term decisions. ESD is even more important in countries with average to high income among their citizens. It is in these countries that the population leaves the biggest ecological footprints and thereby willingness to change. If all the world would live like Swedes, we would need an Earth with 3 times as much resources as now. But ESD is also about providing useful and relevant knowledge to the poorest of the poor. That's the reason international development aid vis-a-vis education aid must be based on the principles of ESD. And what about the international level? UNESCO is, of course, the key player with a clear mandate to lead a global action program, even though the primary responsibility to ensuring the rights to quality education to all rests primarily within the national governments. UNESCO has a decisive role in supporting and catalyzing national efforts, coordinating regional and sub-regional networks to enhance the implementation of ESD, especially with respect to policy improvement and enabling institutional structure in its member states. But UNESCO is not alone on the international arena. To further strengthen the implementation of ESD, it's important that the member states do what they can. And that they do this within the framework of the Global Action Program. As well, that is done in collaboration with existing UNEP programs, like, for example, UNEP's 10-year framework of programs on sustainable consumption and production, which was adopted at the Rio +20 conference. And finally, let me conclude by stressing that activity now is needed in order to solve our most pressing problems. That's the reason why sustainability has to be a key element in the post-2015 agenda. Education is central when it comes to finding ways to sustainable development for sustainable societies. And sustainability can only come through awareness and action from us all. Thank you for your attention, and domo arigato.
Thank you, Minister. Let's move straight to Mr. Mohammed Sama Amer, who's chairman of the Executive Board of UNESCO.
Thank you very much. Honorable Minister of Education, Culture, Sport, Science and Technology of Japan, Madam Director General of UNESCO, distinguished ministers, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I am delighted to address you during the important this high-level roundtable discussion on enhancing policy support for ESD, held within the framework of the World Conference on Education for Sustainable Development, and send you greeting on behalf of all members of the Executive Board of UNESCO, for which I am its chairperson. I am particularly pleased to be here today because the Executive Board of UNESCO has, throughout the entire UN decade of Education for Sustainable Development, DESD, acknowledged the importance of ESD as a response to today's challenges to sustainable development. In recent years, the DESD generated considerable progress toward ESD. It is becoming an integral part of the global debate and discourses on education and sustainable development. The increasing number of member states making a variety of efforts to address ESD is another important sign that it is being considered a critical component of government's effort to improve the quality of education and to make progress towards sustainable development. But much can still be done, and it is in this regard that I congratulate the Director General and Japan's Minister of Education, Culture, Sport, Science and Technology for their initiative to bring together such a great number of ministers to brainstorm ways and means of further integrating ESD into national and local education policies and curriculum. While the final report entitled Shaping the Future We Want of the DESD has showed us much progress has been made in 10 years, yet taking action on ESD is becoming even more urgent. Long-lasting change is altering our planet's environment in an unprecedented manner. We know that education is one of the major drivers and enablers for sustainable development. Education helps to acquire a better understanding and appreciation of other people and the world at large. There is indeed now a growing international recognition of ESD as an integral element of quality education and a key enabler for sustainable development. Both the Muscat Agreement, adopted at the Global Education for All meeting, and the Proposal for Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, developed by the Open Working Group, including ESD, in the proposed target for the post-2015 agenda. The 196th session of the Executive Board closed only 2 weeks ago. Many representatives agreed with me when I said that while education is accorded a prominent role as witnessed by these two documents, we cannot be complacent. We must continue to work and argue with determination, commitment, and conviction to secure the inclusion of the education goal and its multiple targets as it stands in the ultimate post-2015 development agenda, when the decision will be taken by the UN General Assembly during autumn of 2015. I am convinced that if governments provide the political environment for education to be of relevance and quality, we would certainly be witnessing a better world in the future. I look forward to the discussions. Thank you for your attention.
And thank you, Mohammed Sama Amer, Chairman of the Executive Board of UNESCO. And thank you to all our speakers. We open up the round table now to address 4 key questions. And it's worth listening to these 4 key questions again, because your job really is to answer them. Why has ESD been adopted by some countries but not by others? What are the success factors that enable the integration of ESD into education and sustainable development policies? What prevents the creation of an enabling policy environment for ESD? And what actions are needed at national and international levels in order to enhance the policy response to ESD. Now, listen up, because this is even more important. There are a lot of people in this room who want to make an intervention, but time's winged chariot is always hurrying near, if you know that quote, and time does not permit me to allow everyone to do so. So what we're going to do is give every speaker 2 minutes to give their intervention. And as you can see, there's a clock that will time you, and there'll be penalties for people who overspeak. And I haven't decided yet what they are, but there will be. And let me also offer some advice. Don't try and gabble your 2 minutes and get everything worth half an hour into 2 minutes. Because one, people won't understand you, and two, the poor translators won't stand a chance. So as clear as you can in those 2 minutes. Ministers who have had or have speaking opportunities during the plenary sessions will speak last, and only if time permits. A reminder that ministers wishing to circulate a longer statement or a written contribution are welcome to send their text to the Secretariat, and that material will be posted on the conference website. I'll give ministers priority. Those seated around the 4 sides here, or the 3 sides here, have already confirmed their presence at ministerial level. Let's open the discussion. We will now prepare a speakers list, starting with the first 10 speakers. And in order to be heard or seen by ourselves, please raise your nameplate. That looks like UCAP, but it isn't. UNEP? UNEP? Cyprus. Finland. Finland. Nigeria. You got Nigeria.
Do you see the 3 behind?
Yeah, they've got Iran, Saudi Arabia. And Iran. You've got Turkey. I'll do Turkey second, if possible. Can we have Turkey second?
Is Turkey on? Turkey?
Okay, I couldn't see. Turkey is there.
Senegal?
Okay.
Senegal ahead.
Right.
You start with Greece. We have 10 now for the moment. Greece, Turkey. Greece, you get 4 minutes, huh?
Yeah. No, Turkey gets 2. Everybody gets 2.
Canada, everybody else gets 3.
Exactly.
Then you have 4.
Okay, you can put your boards down now. We've decided the first 10, and once we've gone through the first 10, please raise your boards again.
Saudi Arabia, 5.
I had Finland.
Hungary, Finland is new minister. 6, Senegal. 7, Antigua. Can you read it or not?
Yeah, I can, yeah.
Antigua. 8, Saudi Arabia we have. Cyprus. Iran, I don't know whether they have
Azerbaijan.
translation. 9, Antigua.
Antigua.
9,
Antigua.
yeah.
Iran.
Great. Canada, we have already.
Now, we're going to have an unusual start because Greece is going to start. And I'm going to give Greece 4 minutes, largely because they offered me a free holiday. That's not true. But they have formulated a Mediterranean policy, and it was agreed beforehand that we would give Greece 4 minutes. But they are unique. Nobody else will get 4 minutes, I assure you. And after that, the list will go, in terms of regional friendliness, we'll go to Turkey after Greece, then Canada, Saudi Arabia, Hungary, Senegal, Antigua, Cyprus, Iran, China. Those are the first 10. I don't know if the clock will go to 4 minutes, but Greece, you're on, and please start your intervention.
Thank you, Mr. Minister of Education of Japan, dear fellow ministers, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to thank the Japanese authorities for hosting the UNESCO World Conference on ESD, which marks the end of the decade 2005-2014 and launches the Global Action Programme on ESD. Within the context of unusual changes and crises at the economic, ecological, political, and cultural level, the need for the promotion of education is an important factor in the achievement of sustainable development. Concerning my country, Greece, in the year 2005, we had the privilege to organize in Athens the conference for the official launching of the UN Decade ESD in the Mediterranean region. Since then, the Ministry of Education has taken all the necessary steps in order to endorse this policy and carry out a series of actions at all educational levels. For example, we established 50 environmental education centers. We organized over than 45,000 educational programs. 1,500,000 pupils had participated to different relative thematic actions. 83,000 teachers have received substantial guidelines on environmental and health issues. And at the same time, via a dedicated portal, teachers could get access to various types of educational materials, such as videos, photographs, and interactive worksheets. Simultaneously, ESD had been included at the higher education. Our universities are closely collaborating on education and research on sustainable development and on promotion of relative undergraduate and graduate courses. And eventually, in regards to the Mediterranean strategy for ESD, my country had the honor to endorse it during the Hellenic presidency of the Council of the European Union last May. Specifically, Athens had the privilege to host a meeting of 48 ministers in the framework of the Union for the Mediterranean. The Mediterranean strategy on ESD aims at encouraging the countries of the Mediterranean region to develop and incorporate education on ESD into all relevant subjects of their formal educational systems, as well as in non-formal and informal educational activities. The involvement of Greece in it goes back to the UNESCO International Conference on Environment and Society in Greece in the year 1997. And let me remind you the so-called Thessaloniki Declaration of that year, 1997. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Greek contribution to this critical issue and to our conference. And with your permission, I would like to send 1,000 of thanks to professors and specialists who worked hardly on ESD and gave us, politicians, the possibility to take and carry out the right decisions. Thank you very much. That was 4.
Thank you, Greece. You were 10 seconds over, but I'll forgive you this once. Let's go to Turkey. 2 minutes, remember, Turkey.
Thank you. Honorable General Director, esteemed ministers, excellencies. I'm very pleased to come together with you thanks to this conference and express my gratitude to UNESCO and the government of Japan for the initiative, leadership, and organization. Dear participants, sustainable development is achievable only in a world without war and in peaceful communication with each other. For that, education systems need to be structured around that common goal to improve peace in the world. As a dramatic example, international community's inadequate reaction to what is happening in Syria leads millions of children to remain uneducated. We, as Turkey, host more than 1.5 million people, of which 1/3 is at the age of education, basic education, forced to leave the territory of Syria at our lands and within our own capacity of very large extent. As Turkey, we supply that we use for Syrian refugees has exceeded over $4.5 billion so far. Syrian crisis has become increasingly a regional and global problem. Humanitarian and political indifference is no longer possible. Currently, about 150,000 Syrian students are studying in Turkey. 70,000 students are continuing their education at schools established at the camps we set up. Thank you.
Thank you, Turkey. It was hard for me to interrupt those distressing statistics, but thank you for finishing on time. And they are indeed very distressing statistics from that neck of the world. Let's go to Canada, please.
Thank you. Good afternoon, all. In Canada, as many of you know, education is the jurisdiction of provinces and territories. We have no federal Ministry of Education, but rather 13 separate education systems. Hence, our experience has been that over the last decade, implementation of ESD on a pan-Canadian level has been a challenge due to the different priorities of each province and territory. For example, in my province, we decided to opt for a think locally, act locally approach, with the view that if we did this locally, global issues would be addressed as a matter of course. Another example is in Manitoba, where ESD has been embedded in the overall purpose of primary and secondary education. With such a decentralized system, factors such as cooperation and consultation among our various ministries of education are crucial. We are now engaged in a deep discussion about how ESD is integrated into 21st century learning and how it contributes to quality education in the Canadian context. An enabling environment facilitates coordination and consultation among ministries and increases synergies among stakeholders. An important aspect of this is the international education and sustainable development community continuing to work together through a framework and process from UNESCO in order to champion ESD. In Canada, ESD is identified as one of 8 primary areas in the Ministerial Declaration of the Council of Ministers of Education's Learn Canada 2020. I would also note that the UN Decade was instrumental in raising awareness on ESD in the Canadian jurisdictions and served as a common reference point for bringing together everyone, for bringing people together. In conclusion, we have done a lot in Canada, but still a lot of work remains to be done. Thank you.
You speeded up at the end, didn't you? Quite wisely. It might be me, but I haven't heard anybody yet answer any of the questions from 1 to 4. So keep those in mind when you are making your interventions, please, because they are the questions we're here to answer. Okay, so thank you, Canada, very much, and your patience. And to Saudi Arabia, please.
السيدات والسادة السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
On behalf of the Saudian delegation, I would like to salute you on the holding of this excellent conference, and I'd also like to thank UNESCO and the host country the host country Japan. Now, education will allow our country to maintain its resources for its future. This will allow us to give children the expertise and the knowledge that they need to continue to live in a world, which gives us the conviction that it is important to preserve the resources of the world. These are values on which we work in our country, and this in conformity with the religion of Islam, which seeks to preserve the environment and nature. We need to continue our work alongside UNESCO, and thanks to the support of member states, by ensuring that we all work together with cohesion. And we need to develop the human factor so that we can really have a knowledge-based society. In certain Islamic countries, and we should not forget our common objective, the common objective that we have via this organization. UNESCO needs to ensure that its message can go the full length, and not only through adopting indicators. In fact, I would also like to thank all of those who set up this conference, and I would also encourage you to visit the Saudian exhibition. Thank you.
Okay, let's go to Hungary.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Minister. Concerning the questions, especially the first one, the most significant changes have been taken in those countries where ESD wasn't handled as a new competitive subject, but as an integral part which is horizontally well positioned and communicated in existing fields. This type of system-level integrated approach, when it is consequent on all three elements, namely on political, governance and execution level, will bring the expected results, which is confirmed by the Hungarian experiences. What, however, is needed is a maturity model-based assessment system where the countries can measure themselves and define the steps in order to develop their system further. So thank you very much. I was very quick.
I think it's a record.
Messages are over.
I don't know how to summarize that, because you already did. Hungary, thank you very much. Very good. Senegal, do you want to pick the baton up now?
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. I would just like to say that in Senegal, education for sustainable development is something that we've taken on board in our educational programs in primary schools as well as in middle schools and secondary schools. Turning to primary education, I would just like to say that when it comes to tests, when pupils are leaving primary school, moving into middle school, and a nationwide competitive exam to enter 6th grade, there are two tests that students have to take, and they deal with sustainable development. One has to do with the control of resources for sustainable development, and the other one is sustainable development skills. We also have countless activities, 157 different activities dealing with ESD, and 4 of them were convened just a few days ago. We also have mainstreamed ESD in our sectoral program from 2013-2025, which is a program geared towards improving quality, fairness, and transparency in education. And let me just tell you that in ESD, we have to think first and foremost about education. Education must come first before education for sustainable development. ESD doesn't just focus on the environment, it also focuses on economic issues, social issues, issues relating to health, family life, etc. These are all equally important. Thank you.
Yes, I think that's absolutely right. Thank you, Senegal. Antigua, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And a special thank you to UNESCO and to the government and the Minister of Education from Japan for the hospitality and for the invitation. Specifically to answer the first question, why are some countries up to date and why others are not? As the only member here from the Organization of the Eastern Caribbean States, and I look around and I don't see any other of my Caribbean colleagues save for Cuba, and also coming off of the heel of Lima and the OECS and CARICOM conferences on education, we face a dubious challenge in the region of the Caribbean. It's a combination of us being caught between a rock and a hard place. We are small states, we are vulnerable peoples, and we look forward and we invite for a greater degree of collaboration on expertise, on know-how, best practices across the board, especially from our more senior member states and larger member states who also have the expertise. Anything that would be required in order for us to progress as much as we would like, we are holistically dependent on many of our larger senior regional and international partners to be able to do so. And many of the challenges that we face outside of the natural impediments vis-a-vis natural disasters and so forth, which impacts tremendously on our very small budgets, on our vulnerable economies, something that we have to harness with is that if we have the opportunity to broaden and strengthen our relationships through collaboration, then it makes it easier for us to achieve the goals which are hitherto set out. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Antigua and Barbuda. So I'm just making a note about the collaboration. That's a very strong line. Let's go to Cyprus.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me first thank the organizers for organizing this very important event and for their hospitality. It is widely accepted that the integration of ESD into education and sustainable development policies is affected or could be the result of a wide range of factors which are related to socioeconomic, political, and environmental conditions existing at national and international level. Consequently, actions for enhancing ESD should be taken both at national and international levels. At national level, it is necessary to develop initiatives that involve all stakeholders in ESD actions. At the same time, international policies should be reconciled with national policies, and the latter be adapted accordingly. Each country should make an overall assessment upon the completion of the decade for ESD so as to evaluate the level of implementation, the progress that has been achieved, and the challenges to be addressed. At national level, it is also important to link formal, non-formal, and informal education in the framework of ESD through promoting joint policies and establishing synergies between governmental services, the private sector, the academia, and the civil society. Such synergies, which have placed ESD as a priority, have been developed in Cyprus, and they have been very successful. At international level, we consider that it is very important for the countries to develop through consensus clear guidelines in order to promote ESD both regionally and globally. The role of UNESCO as a leading organization on policy enhancement of ESD is crucial, as well as the role of other organizations at international and regional level. Finally, developing mechanisms for funding of ESD, both at national and international level, is crucial, since such mechanisms will support countries to develop synergies towards addressing the challenges ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Developing funding mechanisms is an interesting statement. Let's go to China.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for giving me this opportunity to address this roundtable and share with all of you some of the best practices of China in terms of ESD. The Chinese government has identified the sustainable development of education as a key strategy for national development. And to this end, we have set up an ESD committee, which is gradually shaping a roadmap of ESD that reflects our national characteristics. From our experience, we believe that the following points are essential. First, we need to promote the concept of ESD. We want to make sure that we not only foster the values, but also change their way of living. Second, we need to pay attention to relevant policies. Indeed, the government has integrated ESD into our national medium and long-term educational outline. And third, we need to develop curriculum, improve teaching. Fourth, we need to focus on teacher training. Fifth, we need to provide guidance through standards and examples. And last, we need to form a synergy between government, society, family, and schools, and also encourage experimentation and practices at the grassroots level. In this regard, I welcome all the ministers and delegates to visit our China exhibition. And now we're still faced, of course, with many daunting challenges if we are to achieve ESD worldwide. We believe that we should mobilize our efforts to complete the following tasks. First, we need to carry out effective reviews and evaluations, constantly improve policies, and fostering a more enabling policy environment. Second, we need to step up training for teachers and educators so as to strengthen their capacities. Third, we need to improve quality assessment and monitoring standards. Fourth, we need to enhance theoretical studies. And last, we need to continue engaging in international exchange and cooperation. This conference will launch the new GAP, which will instill new vigor into the global ESD program. Thank you very much.
What about, okay. I'm going to go to somebody else. They've had to leave the room. So what we're going to do now is establish the next set of speakers, the next 10. So if you can raise your boards again, those who want to speak, and we'll make a note of them. While we do that, I might just run through just some of what I've a note or a sentence or a sense of what we've already heard, and I would once again reinforce that you perhaps should look at those 4 questions again and ask yourself, have what I've written really answered or helped emphasize the points those questions raise? So think about that, because you've got a few minutes. Malaysia talked about the ecological challenge to sustainable development, striking a balance between people and planet, which I thought was a good phrase. Sweden emphasized the importance of political engagement, talked about the implementation of sustainability in education from preschool to university level, and a rather lovely phrase, if all the world lived like Swedes, the world would need 3 times as much world resources. Greece outlined their Mediterranean sustainability strategy and talked about the political involvement and the critical issues. Turkey, sustainable development is only attainable in a world without war, and talked about Syria and the millions of uneducated children, the impact, of course, in that part of the world of the war in Syria and elsewhere, impacting not just on Turkey, but of course Lebanon as well, a massive refugee problem. Then Canada, very much the accent on the local. They say all politics are local, in this case sustainability. That's as far as I'll go at the moment, because we now have the next list of 10.
South Sudan.
Okay, thank you for your patience. South Sudan, Malawi, Jordan, Israel, Togo, Tunisia, Switzerland, Sri Lanka, Holy See, and Iraq are the next 10. And so that means we start with South Sudan, please.
Thank you very much. The first question of the successful factors, I would say that the key questions actually is a question of priorities of each state and the region that the state comes from. Whether it is a question of priorities, access to education, or whether it is equality, or issues pertaining to infrastructure, or issues of sustainable funding, and how do you harmonize the education policies. All these combined, if a given country is not, particularly in Africa, it's not in a situation where it can deal with this issue, it becomes impossible for that country to get on a breakthrough regarding the ESD. The second priority question is whether partnerships are balanced or not. The selectivity in relation to into the level of the funding from partners, and this is so clear when it comes to issue of quality and access. Which one do you balance? Do you need more students in school, or you deal with issue quality, which eventually allows you the opportunity to go for sustainable development as the main factor in your education policy. I think this question of priorities within the economies of weak countries is a factor that make it impossible to succeed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, South Sudan. I admit an error in that list because of faulty handwriting, shall we say. It's Swaziland, not Switzerland, we should be going to. But now we're going to go to Malawi.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our comment is on the second question, which is what are successful factors that enable the integration of ESD into education and sustainable development policies? In Malawi, we looked at agenda number 21, which states that efforts on multiple factors are needed to create a more sustainable world. And specifically, when we look at the education system, we felt that there are 4 key issues, which are developmental policies, advocacy and awareness, curriculum development, and teacher training. And our entry point in Malawi is curriculum development, because we feel when the curriculum is right, then you'll be able to reach out to generations of students for many years to come. And after we have developed the curriculum, which we already have, the next thing was the training of teachers that will teach that curriculum. And then that is followed by advocacy and awareness. And we believe that the curriculum is our focal point, and everything else revolves around the curriculum in mobilizing our efforts for sustainable development. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Malawi. I have to say that was a very short answer and to the point. And to me, it was one of the best answers we've had so far. Mainly because it answered the question directly, and gave us an idea of where Malawi is and for the future as well. So it was very clear. So thank you very much for that. Let's go to Jordan.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim.
In the name of God, the Almighty, the Merciful. We'd like to thank the government of Japan for having welcomed or hosted this conference. I'd also like to add that we are speaking in this conference of UNESCO, and then, of course, the United Nations in the background. So, because it's an international organisation, we need to have an international discourse. How can we strengthen sustainable development? We can't just speak about this as a regional issue, but it's an international issue. And there are 2 points here. The first is that we need to have school curriculum, and by that I mean we need to speak about excluding a culture of violence and get rid of the word of violence and speak about tolerance, respecting others and the right to life and environment, and also to safety and security. And secondly, we need to strengthen the principles of justice and fairness, both nationally and internationally. How can we speak about sustainable development when in many of the world's countries people are living through a conflict situation? There are 50 million children in the world who are deprived of education due to conflicts in their countries. And for these reasons, certain international organizations, and we thank them for this, have launched an initiative for future generations, and Jordan has joined this initiative. So how can we speak about promoting sustainable development when in some countries of the world there are refugees who are suffering, and students in Jordan are saving Palestinian refugees and welcoming them to their country?
It's an understanding. Let's go to Israel.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the Israeli curriculum has been updated in recent years to include several subjects and concepts relevant to ESD. For example, the issues in biodiversity is now a key concept in biology classes in middle schools. We have just started strategic reform in teaching and learning practices that is a necessary condition not only for ESD, but for any education aimed at synthesizing knowledge, high-order thinking skills, and social values. We call this reform meaningful learning, and it is based on 3 elements: values, participation, and relevance. Instead of designing a uniform model of an ESD schools, we offered schools to participate in an accreditation program called Green Schools that is a joint initiative with the ministry in other countries. Schools enter the project only after a deliberation process that includes students, teachers, and representatives of the local community. They design their own ESD school project, and they are run to the school's teachers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Israel. Let's go to Togo.
Merci, Président.
Thank you, moderator. I fully associate myself with all of those who've spoken before me in expressing their gratitude to Japan and the other organizers, namely UNESCO, for giving us this opportunity to share our ideas. Togo, despite scant resources, has established an ambitious educational policy based on a 2027 horizon focused on a variety of sectors. And here we try to satisfy 2 challenges. First of all, quality across the board at all levels of education, from preschool all the way up to higher education. This also includes the issue of access, which is of paramount importance. The other challenge we are trying to rise to is that of an education curriculum that is a reflection of and adapted to the socioeconomic environment of our country. Here, we've focused on trying to change behavior through the education of young people. Of course, this requires additional funding through traditional channels of cooperation. We welcome the cooperation that we've received and the support received from both Japan and UNESCO. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Togo. That was most interesting. Let's go to Tunisia.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim.
In the name of God, the Almighty, the Merciful. When UNESCO launched the slogan, Learn to Be, I think that the change that we can see today of a new program adopted by UNESCO can perhaps lead us to modify our slogan. So it says, Learn to Develop. And this within the framework of what we're speaking about today, let's say sustainable development. It's about human, environmental and social development. This depends on the political will, and also at an international level. Perhaps the question must be asked about the post-2015 agenda, and maybe within this policy we could include education for sustainable development. As for Tunisia, we lend much importance to sustainable development and protection of the environment, and this at the educational level. And we have a lot of content dealing with this. Currently, we are revising all of our curriculum programs, and a global reform is taking place of the education sector, and we are very determined, and we would like to give a high importance to sustainable development. We hope this will be successful. Thank you.
Yeah, and so do we. Thank you, Tunisia. Let's go to Swaziland.
Thank you, Program Director. As a country, we believe in ESD, hence 11 different activities were carried out in the country during the past 10 years. In the process of doing that, we had 3 major challenges. The challenge of funding. Most of the initiatives require huge amounts of money. This makes it difficult to implement most programs as successfully as it desired. The concept is excellent, but does not come with any funding. The second challenge, the challenge of mindset. You know that changing the minds, it takes time, cannot do it overnight. So that becomes a very big challenge to us. And then the third challenge, the teacher training for computer education is at a very early stage. We have some problems concerning the creation of posts, mainly by the Minister of Public Service, and that takes time. But we are moving towards addressing the problem, the concept effectively. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Swaziland. Again, very pointed, very clear answers to some of our questions. Let's go to Sri Lanka, please.
Thank you, Excellencies and distinguished guests. It is a deep honor for me to share my thoughts with distinguished experts in the field of education and excellencies. Excellencies, you may be aware that Sri Lanka lost 3 decades of crucial period due to the terrorism. Now we have image as a terrorism-free country under one flag. The government has introduced Mind the Chintana Vision, the manifesto of Excellency the President of Sri Lanka, to image Sri Lanka as a wonder of Asia. Along with it, Sri Lanka envisages in developing Sri Lanka as a regional hub in knowledge and human resources development. The UNESCO took initiative to map out an effective plan for education for sustainable development for Sri Lanka, which would make a significant impact on the educational landscape of Sri Lanka. I am also pleased to state that the UNESCO has ranked Sri Lanka as a Category 2 country, which is Teacher Development Center for South Asia. Excellencies, due to the long-term free education system in Sri Lanka, today as a result, the country has achieved a literacy rate of 94%. One of our key objectives is reach ICT literacy rate of 75% by year 2016. The vision of Ministry of Education of Sri Lanka is to have future generation of citizens equipped with competencies that meet the challenges of rapid changing, globalized, knowledge-driven economy, thus benefiting all stakeholders and populace. Thank you.
Thank you, Sri Lanka, very much. Let's go to the Holy See.
Merci de me donner la parole. Thank you for giving me the floor. I'm above all going to respond to the question of how we can strengthen development. The answer is short. The best way to have a civilization which can be based on sustainable development, we need to make sure we have a good balance between human beings, between the environment, and between economic development. There is a need to invest significantly in the connection between education and sustainability, just like Senegal said. Therefore, there is a need to put the person at the center of a society of sustainability and to make sure that lifelong learning is available for these for human beings. Now we know that families and the local community is important in education too, and we need to take into account also these ways of learning too and these sources of learning. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Let's go to Iraq.
شكرا سيد الرئيس ونشكر الدولة المضيفة.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. We would like to thank the host country as well as UNESCO for convening this event. Based on our own experience, we would refer to four main reasons for the lagging behind. First of all, economic reasons, and in fact we would propose a sustainable development fund per country financed by each national government, including funds from international funds and donors. The second cause would be the lack of political stability, and here I'm speaking about Iraq and the broader area as well. The countries in our region are suffering from political instability. Therefore, instead of focusing on the efforts of the government to develop a social compact between various sectors of society, we get distracted by conflict. On the scale of priorities, well, I would say that instability is one of the main causes, and this is why we have to learn from our experiences, adapt our approaches from each country to come up with strategies that will lead to success. Another cause for our lagging behind is that we haven't finalized the institution building that's required in this area, and this is why we need greater exchanges of experience between countries that have moved further down the road than others. Sustainable development should be available to us all, and that's what we have to strive for. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with that. Thank you very much. Okay, that completes our 10. So let's have another 10, please. So put your boards up. While we get that list, I'll just summarize the best of my ability, which is basically sort of a scribbled note here and there. So please don't be offended if I don't report you verbatim. Or from Hungary, what I saw was evaluation is key. And that is important, because when you're breaking new ground, how do you know if you're making progress or not if you don't know how to measure progress? So evaluation is key. Senegal, sustainable development examinations are held. And education, Senegal education must come first. Antigua and Barbuda, collaboration is important in the Eastern Caribbean, quite rightly for the smaller states. Cyprus, developing funding mechanisms. China has set up an ESD committee to form a roadmap while trying to, at the same time, to define sustainability. Focus on teacher training, and China made a series of strong recommendations. South Sudan, asking the question, are partnerships balanced or not? Are they equitable? Malawi answered our second question. What are the success factors that enable the integration of ESD into education and sustainable development policies? And they answered that very clearly, and basically coming down to getting the curriculum right. Very simple. And Jordan saying this is a global problem, that we need a culture of tolerance and strengthen principles of fairness and justice. Okay, so we are now going to move on to the next 10. Yeah. Okay, so the next 10, Mali will start, and then we'll go to Lesotho, Madagascar, Namibia, Tuvalu, Tonga, Palestine, Ecuador, Kuwait, Indonesia, and Vietnam. That's the list. And let's start, as I say, leave the list here so I can see, with Mali, please.
Merci à vous. Thank you. Thank you to Japan, too. Now, Mali has taken many initiatives to implement in many different domains. First of all, when it comes to for primary, secondary and tertiary education programs, in terms of raising awareness as well, with regards to literacy and through the mass media, and also on the international scene. Unfortunately, narco-terrorists led to a situation, and their actions led to a situation that blocked us in our work and in our objectives. Because we have suffered from this violence, because we have suffered from this denial of sustainable development. This is why we strengthened our convictions to continue, and therefore we made a commitment to continue in the right way. And despite the problems that we have had in our country, in Mali, we believe that we will be able to overcome these issues, and we need to persevere with our ideas. I thank you.
Thank you, Mali. Perseverance is always the key. Let's go to Lesotho.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In Lesotho, we believe that we can enhance policy support for education for sustainable development by collaboration between stakeholders, public and private, intra-ministerial cooperation and strengthening monitoring. Intra-ministerial collaboration between ministries of agriculture, education, and natural resources on education, and outreach programs can reach more people, have more maximum impact while using resources efficiently. In the long term, implementation and support for education for sustainable development will be greatly enhanced. So this is what we are now doing in Lesotho. Thank you.
Thank you, Lesotho. More ministerial cooperation. Let's go to Madagascar.
Excellence, Madame.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we would like to thank you for organizing this event. The government in Madagascar over the years have always focused on the educational system. This has always been one of the main challenges we had faced, trying to guide our educational program with clear policy guidelines so that the country can adapt to changing international environment. ESD is now one of the main planks of our educational curriculum. We've established a national convention on education in October in 2014 in Tananarivo, where all development actors from our country and from abroad met to try to develop new approaches that are innovative and integrated in order to rise to the challenges of sustainable development in its human, economic, and socio-political dimensions. This is why we've started the implementation of ESD in our school system, which shall commence shortly. We have input from the Ministry of Labor, of National Education, and Agriculture. We also have representatives from our partner organizations, including UNESCO, UNICEF, National Action for the Development, and WWF. We want to steer ESD and mainstream it throughout our entire educational system. We believe that this is the best way to make sure that ESD is part and parcel of what goes on within every ministry, raising it or bringing it to the attention of policymakers in order to enhance our ability to mobilize resources, to improve human resources, so that we can do everything that's needed to roll out ESD. Thank you.
Thank you. Madagascar. Let's go to Namibia.
Thank you, moderator. Appreciation to the government of Japan and UNESCO for hosting this conference. For any implementation, there should be a political will, and that is seen within the Namibian context. Policies are there, the ESD policy is there, the plans are there, but then the implementation of any plan would need funds. So funding is the main thing. And also what happened, because ESD is a cross-cutting issue, it is put within the plans of all the sectors. But then lack of capacity of implementation. Teacher training is there, and then competing needs within the country. You'll have to prioritize what is first and what is second. And we know through, during the decade of education for all, access of education to education was stressed, and that brought in the thing of quality. Then that comes that competition to say what is first. If I'm sitting there with teachers who are not qualified, year in, year out, you'll be training these teachers, they will go, others will come. The thing of unqualified teachers is very to the core of implementation of ESD. Then the other thing, the lack of systematic integration of ESD across the curriculum in tertiary education.
Excellent. Bang on. Thank you very much, Namibia. And again, really important points Namibia making and answering some of the questions that we're asking, or one of those 4 points. So great. Thanks for that. Let's go to Tuvalu.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I have 3 points to make to the question that is before us. The first, the full meaning of ESD may not be fully understood. That is the acquisition of knowledge, skills, attitudes, and values necessary to shape a sustainable future for the future generations to meet their own needs. My second point, the thinking that ESD is only the responsibility of schools and the Ministry of Education, when it should be known that it is the duty and responsibility of every single stakeholders. My third and last point, the lack of awareness of the various key sustainable development issues, example, biodiversity, climate change, disaster management, cultural diversity, poverty reduction, gender equality, health promotion, sustainable lifestyles, peace and human security, economy and water. Thank you.
Thank you, Tuvalu. Excellent. Let's go to Tonga.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I would like to thank the government of Japan for the excellent organization and warm hospitality we have enjoyed since our arrival. Sustainable development is the key to survival in the small Pacific states. The success of Tonga's ESD program was its ability to contextualize what ESD means to the Tongan people in our own context. Contextualization was facilitated by a piece of key research commissioned by the government in 2005, which identified what the Tongans mean by sustainable development and identified also the key values, knowledge, and skills required by every Tongan to live sustainably in our own context. These values, knowledge, and skills have been embedded in our curriculum for all levels, in our teacher training programs, and of course in our educational policies and practices. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Really excellent. Really good. Thank you very much, Tonga. Let's go to Palestine.
شكرا لحكومة اليابان واليونسكو.
I thank the Japanese government and UNESCO for the holding of this conference. In Palestine, we try to train teachers using the latest methodology, the most modern methodology. And we thank Arab and European countries for their support in this, because without financial support we wouldn't be able to do anything. We try and pay attention to quality first of all, and we try to cooperate with our friends in Arab countries to develop programs and also teaching practices and to change best practices. However, we also have to look at this as a global issue, an international issue. Also in Palestine, we have developed teacher training programs. However, I believe everybody knows what happened in Gaza. All of the efforts that we have made in terms of development collapsed in just a few days. In fact, we know that children suffer from the natural disasters, but also the lack of resources such as water. So how can we really envisage sustainable development in a country where only half of the country can have access to resources? So this is a major obstacle to development. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The stresses of trying to implement SD, sustainable development, in what can we say, a hostile environment. Let's go to Ecuador.
UNESCO y muchas gracias.
We would like to express our gratitude to both the government of Japan and to UNESCO for having given us the opportunity to attend this conference. I'm going to answer the first question if I can. That is, why are some countries introducing ESD and others not? Perhaps it's because they have greater opportunities to provide ESD than other countries. The most important thing, though, is political will. No government can shirk its responsibilities when it comes to making funds available for ESD. And I'm saying this because in many of the countries of the South, education is one of the top priorities. Infrastructure, teacher training, the consolidation of the educational community, the use of new technologies in educational systems require funding. And in order for funds to be made available for this, you have to have decisive political action. Now in Ecuador, we have come up with some very ambitious goals. 6% of our GDP has been earmarked for education. That's our target. We currently stand at around 4%. As I said at the outset, this requires political decisiveness, political resolve from the national government in order to redirect funds and invest in education. And this is really the most important thing if we want to generate genuine social and political change. This means that sacrifices have to be made. If you want to put your money into education, then you will have to do that in order to invest in the future of a society that can be a society based on freedom and sustainable development. Thank you.
Let's go to Kuwait.
Thank you for this opportunity to take the floor. Regarding our point of view, I'll speak about the civil society. The SIDE Foundation, notably, and indeed I'd like to apologise on behalf of the Shaker because she should have been here at this conference, to attend this conference. So, regarding the first point, what are the success factors in some countries, but sources of failure in other countries? Well, success factor resides in the double participation of the private sector and the civil society, working alongside the public sector when it comes to implementing education on sustainable development into education programs. The second issue is to determine what we actually want as a final product. What do we want our education systems to give us? Therefore, we need to put in place indicators to determine to what extent we are able to actually instill or implement ESD in education. And the third point, UNESCO needs to implement ESD in all of the education programs across the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Kuwait. Just making a note on that last one. And now to Indonesia.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Mr. Shimamura from Japan, Madam Irina Bukova, and of course, Mr. Chair, Mr. Stephen Cole. When ESD was introduced 2 years ago in Indonesia, we found out Indonesian at that time was becoming very individualistic, materialistic, high competition that create great social unrest and the exhaustion of natural resources that also create climate change and natural disaster. So ESD came and cure because we can create social cohesion balance between moral, cultural, emotional, with intellectual power, the harmony with nature, protect resources to create green planet for humanistic benefit. So we create with ESD, character building is the core. How to make it successful? We work together with NGOs, media, and business circle. Certainly with our friend in the parliament to make the policy, legal framework, and political framework. And alhamdulillah, we got the financial support from the government to have 20% for education in Indonesia. Our challenge is, of course, teachers training and socialization to the remote places, to 2.7 million teachers and 51 million students. But we are very sure and optimistic that ESD is going to make this planet becoming peaceful. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.
Oh, thank you very much. Very good. And Vietnam, please.
Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, Vietnam government confirmed its high political commitment to support the UN resolution on ESD. The decade of ESD have been implemented in Vietnam since 2005, and the human resources considered as the central factor of sustainable socio-economic development. Thus, the government has given priority to education and training by putting 20% of government spending yearly on this sector. We have over 21 million students and more than 1.2 million teachers in all levels of education system among 90 million people of population. After 10 years of implementing ESD, there have been significant improvement in education training quality. In recent years, Vietnam has been highly ranked by assessment organizations such as PISA and BASAC. Compulsory to the class 9 have been implemented. Higher education is a process of fundamental and comprehensive innovation to meet the requirement of period of regional and international integration. The government had approved the strategy of development of education and training to the year of 2020 with 9 important action plans. This period of implementing of decade of ESD were introduced to the strategy through the integration of ESD content into policy, education syllabuses, methodology of teaching. The education, human rights, justice, climate change have been introduced to the whole education system. Vietnam Education Committee working together with UNESCO and other countries to promote education for sustainable development to build a future work with sustainability in the economic, society, environment. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Vietnam. Said a lot in a minute 45 there. Thank you very much. And to Iran.
In the name of God, the merciful, the compassionate, I would like to express my gratitude to the government of Japan and to UNESCO for having organized this meeting. I will be focusing on question 2. What are the successful factors that enable the integration of ESD? Accurate understanding of the ESD concept, preference of sustainable development over other development approaches, and determination and will of policymakers for implementation of ESD is the most important successful factor for integration of ESD into educational policies. Therefore, in-depth literature on ESD, both its concepts and more applied research on ESD based on specific cultural and social contexts of each country is necessary for ESD to be properly integrated into a traditional education system. A systematic approach to the overall development planning is crucial for integration of ESD into education policies and sustainable development policies. And without a systematic and balanced approach to our development policy that takes into consideration the 3 main pillars of social and cultural requirements, economic growth, and environmental sustainability, ESD cannot be fully and effectively integrated into the overall policy planning in general and into the education system in particular. ESD integration into education and sustainable development policies requires the adoption of relevant laws, rules, and regulations, the development of a consensus among various development policy planners in different sectors when it comes to ESD, and also cooperation between government and the Legislative Assembly to address ESD is necessary for its integration into a broader sustainable development policy.
All right, lovely. Thank you, Iran. That completes our 10. So I think we're just going to take 5 more. So if you can put your nameplates up if you want to be one of the last 5. And while that list is being compiled, I'll just run through what caught my eye. The Israeli curriculum has been updated, taking into account sustainable development. Togo, scant resources but ambitious policy plans towards 2027, and the action plan emphasizing the quality of education and access to education. Swaziland, we believe in ESD and listed the challenges of funding and the concept, interesting challenge, and the mindset, and the third challenge, once again, a recurring theme, teacher training. Holy See, a good balance between economic development and human development. We need to invest in sustainability. Iraq listed 4 reasons for lack of achievements, lack of funds, lack of political stability. You have to learn to adapt from country to country and need to finalize institution building. Mali, they suffered from narco-terrorism, which had blocked much of their work. Lesotho, more ministerial cooperation. Do we have the 5? And that's where I got up to. Okay. So we have the last 5. Eritrea, Kiribati, Thailand, Finland, and this time Switzerland, not Swaziland. So let's start with Eritrea.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. In the first place, I would like to join my colleagues in thanking the UNESCO and the Japanese government for making this forum possible. In Eritrea, recently, about 1 month ago, we had a national assessment of our educational situation in order to find out the programs including ESD. We have a curriculum that's workable and doing fine in that. We provide our educational system free, kindergarten to tertiary. We also provide our educational system at the elementary in mother tongue, and this we found out that this needs much resource and expertise and need focus in the future. We have an excellent participation by our communities throughout the country, and some of the things that we critically looked at and need strengthening are lack of capacity in data processing and statistical development. The other one is one of the main hurdles is shortage of trained. I mean, as other countries, many countries, in fact, have mentioned that there is a problem of trained teacher personnel and teacher and manager personnel in the educational system. We share this problem as one of the main hurdles, and we would like our policy to direct towards the weaknesses. And thank you.
Thank you very much. Kiribati, please.
Thank you very much, Moderator. On behalf of the Kiribati government, I'd like to thank Japan and UNESCO for inviting us to Nagoya. On the ESD, I'd like to say that our school curriculum has already incorporated some of these ideas, and we are grateful to our development partners for their support towards the reform that enabled Kiribati to carry out a new national curriculum assessment framework, which enables us to incorporate all these ESD related activities in the school curricula. On the, we believe that the success of the ESD has been contributed from our various ministries in the governments, and we thank all the stakeholders in our country for their contributions towards our national curricula. But I think we still remain with the challenge of strengthening the how we evaluate and monitor, and we thank the opportunity of being here to learning from the booths that are being set up. We're trying to catch up as much as we can, learning from each other, and I thank all the earlier speakers and all the presentations made on the floor that enabled us to learn more and more things from the websites that were made available. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kiribati. So we're going to take Thailand next. Just a reminder, we've just added one last one. So we'll have Thailand, Finland, Switzerland, and then lastly, Nepal. So Thailand, you're next.
Mr. Moderator, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to take this opportunity to express my thanks to UNESCO and the government of Japan for organizing this conference. On answering the second question about successful implementation of ESD in Thailand, I'd like to say that it comes right after implanting the concept of sustainable development and education for all about 10 years ago. So with these two concepts, I think ESD can follow quite easily. To look ahead, that might answer the fourth question. In Thailand, we moved forward ESD with philosophy of sufficient economy, human core values, and what I call the cultural foundations of the Orient into the National Development Plan. The sufficient economy is a philosophy for livelihood advised by the king, who has worked for over 50 years in rural development of Thailand. The basic tenets are moderation, responsible consumption, and appropriate risk management. On human core values and Oriental cultural foundations, we bring in the notions of caring, compassion, kindness, sharing into play. We believe that this would provide what they call local flavors of ESD. I would like to touch on a bit on ASEAN that the Deputy Prime Minister of Malaysia was saying. In next year, we would have this ASEAN community consisting of 10 countries and about 700 million people, which the mobility of people, connectivity of people. I think ESD would be put to test whether it could empower our people to foster knowledge, tolerance, appreciation of different cultures, and recognition of diversities. I think all these are basis for peaceful and harmonious living. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Thailand. Yeah, I think you're the first to highlight the difficulties with SD and movements, especially mass movements of people. Let's go to Finland, please.
Thank you. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. An independent evaluation on the national ESD strategies was carried out in Finland in 2012. One of the lessons learned was that the policy coherence is of utmost importance. ESD will need to be better integrated into all the main steering policies and mechanisms in order to be successful. We are revising the national curriculum for basic education. In this context, the need for a sustainable way of living and eco-social understanding will be emphasized, forming the value basis of all education. At the same time, the working culture of every school is intended to be based on the whole institution approach. Other areas that need attention according to the Finnish evaluation were better incorporation of SD and ESD in teachers' education across the board. Second, need to keep searching a shared view on sustainability in education. clarification of the share of work and responsibilities between different stakeholders, and encouragement and support for local communities. The latest approach in Finland is a process called Society's Commitment to Sustainability that was launched by the National Commission for Sustainable Development last year. The process includes a vision on sustainable development, shared objectives, indicators, and a mechanism to publish and report on individual commitments on the web. Education is integrated within the objectives of the commitment. The idea is that operational commitments are established on the voluntary basis by all stakeholders in the society. Thank you.
A perfect place to stop. Thank you very much, Finland. Let's move to our penultimate speaker, Switzerland.
Madame, Monsieur, chers collègues, permettez-moi.
Dear colleagues, first of all, I'd like to thank the Japanese authorities for having allowed us to meet here, so many of us, and I'd also like to thank them for their warm hospitality. My country, Switzerland, is honoured to be part of this conference, and we are committed, and we salute all of the efforts that UNESCO has made in this area. I'd like to say that the UN Decade for Education for Sustainable Development has helped to allow to move forward significantly the implementation of ESD in compulsory education and in teacher training in Switzerland. First of all, this was written into the study plans in the country, and also an approach which covers the whole of the educational sector. Now, in Switzerland, we have been able to develop teacher training methods in view of a cross-sectoral approach across the educational sector. Also considering school as a space of not only learning but life in general, and also the creation of ESD in lifelong learning and lifelong teacher training. Thank you.
Paul?
I would like to thank the government of the government of Japan for providing us warm, generous, and gracious hospitality. As Nepal has adopted ESD, and we have formed ESD-related committee chaired by the Joint Secretary of Ministry of Education, and the Secretariat is the National Commission for UNESCO. We have revised the curriculum for grade 6 and 9 and developed new textbook accordingly, the science and social studies. We have reviewed national curriculum of non-formal education, the literacy and alternative education program, and we have incorporated education for sustainable development related materials in textbook of literacy, for example, forest, water, and climate change. And we have revised teacher training package from the perspective of ESD. And 10 community learning center has been selected for training and empowerment. Yes, we have realized that the students are the greatest national resources, and for that reason, we have formed a school management committee, and school management committee has been one of the most powerful and effective tools to realize the fact that education is the best infrastructures among all, and through school management committee we have been able to make the community realize the importance of education. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And what a great way to bring that to a close with those incredibly wise words that young people are a country's strongest resource. Just as we've learned to live unsustainably, we now need to learn how to live sustainably, is the final comment. 37 countries we got through in that time. Each one made a positive contribution and intervention this afternoon. So I'm very grateful to you all because you cooperated really well, and that made this a very, very strong session. I think we've heard plenty of ways to move sustainable development, education policy and action forward to meet different global, regional, national and local needs. Why is all that important? Because education is the great hope. It's now time for our closing remarks, beginning with the Director General, Irina Bokova.
Oui, merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Stephen. Stephen, I think that you've rightly described this discussion as a very rich one. We've heard from 36 countries, and I think we're on the right track. What I've drawn from this discussion is that we have to ensure consistency and mainstreaming of ESD in the education systems of all countries. Another issue that we see emerging from the discussion is that many countries are facing common challenges. We have to improve access to education and the quality of education. What this means is that we have to go beyond the mere issue of access to education. We have to ensure that there will be quality education. That means that we have to provide the input for that. Here I'm talking about teacher training, curricula, financing for education through national budgets, of course, but also through development assistance. And the most important thing today is that we now have a much clearer understanding as to the need to include education for sustainable development at all levels of education. Another issue that has arisen is the importance of placing everything in the proper context, and this is something that many speakers mentioned. It's also essential to develop an action plan, and in fact the main outlines of a global action plan have already been outlined at UNESCO's General Conference, and on the basis of what we've discussed here in Nagoya, we can now move forward to the Global Forum on Education and integrate ESD in the post-2015 agenda. UNESCO is here standing by you to assist you and to coordinate all of the activities that are currently underway. And as I said this morning, we can help you develop the best way to ensure monitoring and evaluation of all of the different components of ESD, and I think that this is very important if we're going to make meaningful progress in the future. So thank you all, and I would to first thank our moderator, Stephen Cole, for this afternoon's discussion. It's been an excellent debate, and he's done a great job moderating it. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Madame Director General. Just last remarks now from the co-chair, Minister Shimamura.
Thank you, Mr. Cole, for leading such a lively discussion. I thank you all for the meaningful discussion we are able to have despite the time constraint. I appreciate your cooperation. A summary of the talks will be presented at the plenary closing session on the final day. We anticipate that today's talks will bolster the promotion of ESD in each country. I have high hopes that you will take home what we debated today and promote ESD further through your strong leadership. Please, thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister. So this session is now closed, but could I ask the Liberian delegation to come to see the Secretariat immediately afterwards. Thank you again, everybody.